time for fundamentals of car audio. That's right, guys. We're going to hit this bad boy up. So everyone just take a second, take a minute, take a breather, and let's head over to remote turn on. Today we're going to learn about remote turn on. I know this seems like a really simple topic, but you'd be wrong. There's a lot of things about remote turn on that, well, it could be painful, which is why we came up with this cool art here. What is remote turn on? Remote turn on is a 12 volt low amperage output used to activate accessories, usually from an aftermarket radio or some form of device. What I mean by some form of device is that means if you have like a DSP or something like that that has an output, that has an input and an output. That's really helpful because it usually has a relay built into it. So, or it's going to use some of the features we're going to talk about to create a remote turn on output. So there are not just one device now that has remote turn on, like an aftermarket radio. Some of your processors will generate a remote turn on for you as well. In the audio control world, that's called GTO, or great turn on. And then everyone has a version of it. Most companies have a version of it. Some of the things you might turn on: amplifiers, DSP EQs, relays, fans, voltmeters, lights, video screens. Not all accessories should be connected directly to a remote turn on output. For those, you wire in a relay. How to wire up a relay. For those of you that want to know this, take a screenshot right now. This is the basic wiring diagram for a relay. Most 5-pin relays are going to be designed like this. You have a 30, an 87A, an 87, 85, and 86. 85 is going to go to ground. 86 is going to be the triggered input from the device, meaning the radio or DSP or whatever it is. 12 volt power in is going to be on 30. This is your hot input. This is going to feed the accessories. Make sure it is a fused source. Don't connect it to the output of the amplifier. It needs to be a low enough amperage that it will turn off the source power. So for example, if you're powering up 3 relays, you don't need to put a 30 amp fuse here. It'd be nice to put maybe, let's say, a 10, a 15, probably a 10 amp fuse on it. 87A is not used in this application, and 87 is going to be your output. Some relays have diodes built into them to prevent popping and voltage problems, or backfeeding as it were. And for those that don't, you can put a diode in there between 85 and 86. The stripe in this case will be towards 86 because we're using 86 for the remote positive input. If you were going to flip those two, you'd have to flip the diode. Sometimes amplifiers will backfeed into one another. A diode can be used to separate accessories so they do not backfeed into each other. The diagram here at the bottom is showing you your 12 volt in, 2 diodes, and 12 volt out. You will need a diode on everything you are trying to isolate. So if you have 2 amplifiers, you'll use 2 diodes. Don't use just 1 diode because you want to make sure that the amplifier doesn't feed back into anything else. So for every piece of equipment, use this. Now that is not a common thing. However, there are certain situations where some older amplifiers, that output becomes bad. That input becomes bad, in which case adding in a diode between your amplifiers will solve any issues. Also, if you have an amplifier that has like DC offset and it's doing strange things and it's backfeeding into the other amplifiers and you don't want it to do that, add in a diode and it will stop that. Diodes will let 12 volts positive pass through only. Diodes are directional. If you wire them up backwards, they will not work properly for what you're trying to do. If we're trying to pass 12 volts, the stripe is towards the device. Okay, moving on. There is more than one type of turn on. I know, right? Who would have thought? There is. There's actually 3 specific ones. There are others, but we're going to talk about the 3 main ones. The standard remote out can mostly be found in aftermarket radios. It is a blue with a white stripe. It is the standard color on those radios. Not the solid blue. The solid blue is an amplified, not the amplified turn on. It is the FM turn on for the amplified antennas. So blue with a white stripe should only be used to turn on amplifiers on a standard radio. The next, which is becoming the most popular for sure right now, is DC offset. This diagram here is showing you how to measure for DC offset with a standard digital multimeter. You set your digital multimeter to the line with the dots beneath it. One lead goes to ground. The other lead is going to go to the positive of the speaker. If you have somewhere around 6 volts, you have DC offset. Turn the car off, wait for it to go to sleep, make sure it goes away. It may not turn on and off with the car because the car's stereo, though the screen will go off, that does not mean that the back side of it, meaning the amplifiers and whatnot, are actually turning off. A lot of times when you turn off a car on a modern car, all it's doing is turning off the screen. It is not actually turning off the stereo because there are chimes and or it takes a long time to boot up. So they are doing a staggered shutdown so that everything just doesn't go boom, off, speaker pop. DC offset is a 6-volt DC voltage found coming over the speaker output wires. It is usually found on a factory radio or amps. It can be tested with a digital multimeter. Connect the positive test lead to the plus speaker output, connect the black lead to ground, and turn on the radio. No volume is needed. The meter should read 6 volts with the car on. Signal Sense. This is an oldie but a goodie. I'm not a big fan of Signal Sense, however, it is getting better. Signal Sense senses the AC signal output coming from your source. Sound is AC, so it is looking for that. It's looking for that AC to move up and down. When it sees it moving, it goes, oh, I'll turn on, because it's got to be sound coming in. Most will have a delay off so that the low volume or pause the sound does not turn it off. This was a problem when Signal Sense first came out. Between tracks, there's no sound, so it would turn itself off because it wouldn't see that. So now the smarter ones have put a delay in there that waits and says, oh, I have no sound. 1, 2, 3. Oh, sound is back. Also at lower volumes or quieter sequences, they weren't that sensitive. It would be like, oh, there's no sound. Just shut off. Well, now it's like in a quiet moment of the song, if it's not doing much, it won't automatically just shut off and kill whatever you got going on to it. It is the most reliable choice of the choices. Good play on words, Dean. There again, if it's an option, I don't like to use it. If it's the last option, I'm probably still going to find something else. But in a pinch, it'll do the job. Because of this, there are some add-on, turn-on devices. So life has gotten better. Not everything has DC offset or Signal Sense or something like that. Sometimes we just have to go find something else. This is a group of devices used to solve problems in your install. In the past, you could just connect to an accessory turn-on in the car. Today's cars, however, do not always have a usable accessory turn-on. You might get lucky and the cigarette lighter will turn on and off with the car. However, if you have an American car, that might not be the case. So you have to figure out a way to get these amps to turn on and off, or whatever it is you're trying to turn on and off. PAC Audio makes the NIG3 or Ignition 3, as well as WaveTech makes the IRAD. These devices use voltage sensing to activate and have delays to stay on in newer stop-start cars. This is actually a really cool category of devices. What it does is once the car starts up and your alternator starts putting out power, it says, hey, the DC has changed, and it turns on. Then it has a timer. When you shut the car off, it stays on, and because it doesn't know if it's a stop-start or just turning the key off. They usually have some form of variable adjustment time off, meaning you can like say, I want it to stay on for 5 seconds, I want it to stay off, or whatever. So when you turn the car off, or the stop-start turns the car off, it will keep that power source on for up to 30 seconds, as little as 10 seconds. And then so you can enjoy your music. The downside to this device is you have to start the car in order to use this as a turn-on. You can't just put it in run, you know, with the key on and have it make sound, because it needs to see the alternator turn on. It's basically using some of the oldest technology ever, signal voltage sense, which is what we've been using with remote starts for years and years and years, when you didn't have to go grab a wire underneath the dash. I'm sorry, underneath the hood. PEC Audio makes the TR4, and Access makes the aux URT. These devices can use a low voltage input to activate an output. This is basically something akin to looking for DC offset. You could take both of these devices, and if your sound system has DC offset, you can connect the positive wire to the positive speaker wire, ground it, and it has an output that will turn a device on. It's a low amperage output, so I do strongly recommend anytime you use one of these to turn on more than one thing, you do use a relay. But these can be very helpful. We've ran into several situations where we needed an external DC offset in order to turn the amplifiers on, and the TR4 was a saving grace in it. We try to keep at least one or two of these around the bay all the time. PEC Audio makes the TR7, and Access makes the Trigger. These devices are both very similar. These devices use an assortment of inputs to create custom outputs. Basically what that means is these can do all kinds of things. If you need something that has a delay turn on, if you need something that has a delay turn off, if you need them to sense DC offset or a low signal input, it can do that. So these are kind of like the Swiss Army knife of creating turn on and turn offs. PEC also makes a product called the Volt 39. This device can lower the output voltage of the output turn on. This is also very helpful when dealing with backup cameras or something like this Ford Mustang sitting over here. This used a 5-volt turn on to turn on the factory amplifier. If you throw 12 volts at it, what you get is this tremendous turn on pop. So you put a Volt 39 on it, it'll do 3, 5, 6, or 9 volts on a little switch on the side. You switch it to 5, you don't have a turn on pop anymore. It's a pretty spectacular thing. Most factory cameras need a 6-volt turn on. Try to put 12 volts to them, you're going to be buying yourself a new camera. This device will solve that problem. These are all pretty cool little devices that you can have hanging around the install bay. But as you can see, remote turn on is just not a simple blue-white wire on the back of the radio anymore. It's getting quite complex. And we hope this helps you just a little bit trying to figure out what you might have going on in your car and or a solution for it. Boom. And this, guys, has been Fundamentals of Car Audio. You can find all these products, of course, those things we just talked about, at dnftooldrawer.com.